Conventional wisdom casts the United States as the honest broker between two recalcitrant states, Israel and Palestine. In fact, the opposite is true. The broad international consensus, which includes the Arab states, Palestine, the PLO, which governs it, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, virtually the entire world population resoundingly agrees in the proposal of a two-state peaceful settlement between Israel and Palestine. Yet every time it is brought up at the UN Security Council, it is vetoed by the only world superpower, the United States, and of course its lapdog Israel. That veto alone is the one that decides the issue. This should tell you something about the power asymmetry in geopolitics. The fact that we have a rogue state that is in the minority of the world consensus, and yet the entire world must obey its decisions. If you have any illusions about democracy playing out on the world stage, let me end that for you right now. That is not how the world is run. The world is run like the Mafia, and the United States is the godfather. In November 2005, Israel and Palestine reached a ceasefire agreement. In January of 2006, the Palestinians made one grave mistake. They held a free and fair election, and they elected the wrong people. They elected Hamas. This was not acceptable to the Israeli government and the United States, who immediately started planning a military coup. When Hamas successfully thwarted the planned coup, the Israeli security forces reverted to a strategy they call mowing the lawn.
There's an episode of what Israel calls mowing the lawn. Smash them up. They're defenseless, of course. Then there's an agreement reached, which Hamas accepts and lives up to. Israel violates it constantly. Finally, an Israeli escalation of the violation leads to some Hamas response, which Israel uses as a pretext for the next episode of mowing the lawn.
There's one side in this conflict that consistently thwarts negotiated ceasefire agreements: Israel. One of the main reasons for the escalation of violence that we saw from Hamas last week is that in the 8 months preceding the attack on October 7th, Israeli security forces killed 248 Palestinian civilians, and 40 of them were children. If we want to talk about dead babies, the Israeli security forces are largely to blame. They have the body count to prove it. This is the side that is never reported. And this is why, when you simp for the Israeli government, when you stand with Israel, you are showcasing your ignorance in the actual context of this violent conflict, which has been ongoing for decades and decades now. You are an unwitting mouthpiece for power. You are unwittingly showcasing your bias. We're telling everyone that you don't mind violence as long as it's tucked away and against the right people. You have no commitment to being anti-violence. You only uncritically accept the imperial Western narrative. Where were you back in May when the UN was reporting on recent deadly escalations that was caused by the Israeli security forces? Where were you back in May when Israeli airstrikes killed 12 civilians, including 6 children in Gaza? Where were you when the Israeli security forces killed 110 Palestinians this year? That was back in May alone. Since then, the number has risen. One diplomat back in May said if this alarming rate of casualties continues, 2023 will be the deadliest year for Palestinians in the West Bank since the United Nations records began in 2004.
One of the main reasons why the attack happened in Gaza by Hamas is the fact that during the last 8 months, before this whole thing started, Israeli army and Israeli settlers killed 248 Palestinians, including 40 children.
Hamas are terrorists. The Israeli government is terrorist. If you want to talk about terrorism, let's talk about the greatest terrorist organization in human history, the United States government. That's silly. Hamas was created by the Israeli government. You are ridiculous. Yet still not as ridiculous as Benjamin Netanyahu's own words when he stated, anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas. Or when he acknowledged this is part of our strategy, to isolate the Palestinians in Gaza from the Palestinians in the West Bank. The president of Israel is openly calling for a genocide, saying there are no innocent civilians in Gaza. You cannot overstate how batshit crazy this is. The Israeli president is publicly acknowledging and admitting that the official strategic position of the Israeli army is to indiscriminately slaughter every man, woman, and child in Gaza. This is, of course, once again, a violation of international law. But Israel can do it. So why is Israel getting away with it? Because Israel is the lapdog of the United States. And if the United States says yes, okay, then it happens. You already heard the president lie to the world earlier this week when he said that he saw photos of beheaded babies. And I can only imagine the sense of relief and euphoria Israeli government officials must have felt when they heard their propaganda being repeated by the most powerful man in the world. U.S. State Department officials have even circulated internal warnings within the State Department that they are forbidden to use phrases such as de-escalation, ceasefire, end to violence and bloodshed, restoring calm. The United States is absolutely complicit in what may be one of the worst atrocities committed in recent memory. We live in a world where the Israeli head of state can say without a trace of irony that he is up against an empire of evil, a strip of land which is one of the poorest places on earth, one of the greatest victims of international terrorism, is part of an empire of evil. Every accusation is only an admission. Well, I would have supported Palestine, but not like this. I see. Why not? They didn't wage war like a Western country, Hey, look, I get it. You're disappointed that a place that was denied statehood and the right to self-determine can't field an army. They came over on hang gliders and bulldozers. It looked like a jailbreak. What was that all about? Yeah, I get it. The army is capable of doing all that, but at least they do it in formation with tactical maneuvers. Exactly. Couldn't they have put more money into this thing and made it look a little bit more official? Then maybe I wouldn't think of them as they are, which is absolute scum of the earth, blood-sucking terrorist animals. But they are the ones that are being colonized. And Jewish people stand with Palestine. What you're doing is conflating the Israeli apartheid state regime with Jewish people. They are two completely different things. When someone says this, what they don't know is that they are unwittingly saying, I side with the Zionist apartheid state regime of Israel. I really wonder if this person was bothering to pay attention when the Israeli Defense Forces massacred 240 Palestinians this year, 40 of which were children. Did he stand with Palestine then? Probably not. He probably can't even spot Israel on the map. This is exactly like saying you stand with segregationists. It's exactly like saying you support apartheid. You have to make the distinction between Jewish people and the Israeli government. If you cannot do that, then I don't know what to tell you. What's even more ironic is I can bet you that this is the same person that says, I stand with Ukraine. Slava Ukraini. And this is the ultimate hypocrisy, because they can understand and get behind the logic of Russia invading Ukraine and taking its land, but when it comes to Palestine getting colonized, these same people side with colonizers. And what it reveals is the inherent underlying racism behind most people's opinions about foreign affairs or domestic affairs. It's only wrong if a white country is getting invaded. Brown countries getting invaded is always justified because they're extremists. They're terrorists. White people are incapable of doing terror. When white people do it, it's for freedom, it's for justice, it's for democracy.
Nixon ordered Cambodian genocide. Clinton sent cruise missiles to Sudan, people died. You gave the orders to do drone strikes. Invaded Nicaragua in '85.